President Buhari orders security chiefs to restore public confidence on security.
Much more to ensure that Nigerians go to bed and wake up feeling healthy and confident that their security is guaranteed.
Court of Appeal affirms Boyega Oyetola's election as Osun governor.
Senate confirms Abike Dabiri Erewa as Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Nigerians in Diaspora Commission.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall discuss community policing.
Community policing is a system of allocating police officers to a particular area so that they become familiar with the local inhabitants.
Now, several countries around the world have already implemented community policing, which has been considered effective in intelligence gathering and the promotion of public safety.
And in Nigeria, community policing is not new, as it has been carried out in some states in the country, and presently 18 states are practicing it. But Kingsley, one may be inclined to ask the question, what we have in the 18 states of the Federation, should that be referred to as community policing system or ancillary organizations assisting, you know?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's more like it. Not the classic definition of community policing. But of course, we're going to have our experts who will be joining us in the course of the conversation to give us their definitional perspectives on what community policing is and what it entails. But a number of security experts have already argued that with community policing, stronger ties are formed between the police and the public to collectively tackle issues relating to security.
That's right, Kingsley, and little wonder President Muhammadu Buhari ordered the immediate enforcement of community policing in all states of the Federation.
Well, with a directive by the President, well, it's certain that if properly implemented, it would serve in helping to reduce crime and criminality significantly.
Now, the question we are asking, or are going to be asking this morning, what are the benefits of community policing and how community policing is different from state police? These are the issues on the front burner. So Good Morning Nigeria focuses on community policing today. My name is Kirian Umai. We thank you for finding time to join us.
All right, and I'm Kingsley Osadolo. Now, in addition to the questions that my colleague Kirian already raised, Kirian, of course, between what we now refer to, let's say, as community police, assuming it becomes an organization, and pre-existing entities in the state, such as OPC, you have in most parts of the Southwest, or, the Hisba police, for instance, that you have.
They are given different names.
That's right. That's right. All right, so that's what we'll be looking at in our conversation segments on Good Morning Nigeria, being broadcast live, as always, on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We are right here at Abuja, that's Nigeria's capital city. In the course of the program, we have our regular complimentary segments, and these include newspaper review, business, and others. In the meantime, let's take the highlights of the morning news, and here is Abdul Malik Adio. Hi, Abdul Malik, good morning. You look like a community police officer.
Because I'm wearing black, not a problem. Good morning, Kingsley and Kirian, and welcome to the news. President Muhammadu Buhari has renewed his marching order to Nigerian law enforcement agencies to, as a matter of urgency, restore public confidence in governance, describing the prevailing state of uncertainty, apprehension in the nation's security situation as disturbing and intolerable. This was at a strategic meeting with service chiefs and heads of other security agencies in his office.
Giving directives that the agencies do much more to ensure that Nigerians go to bed and wake up feeling healthy and confident that their security is guaranteed. We recall that after the last meeting, various operations were set up, Puff Ada being one of such strategies. There had been a remarkable drop in the number of kidnappings. What normally would attract attention is when a key person in government or perhaps is kidnapped. But on the whole, the number of kidnappings has dropped, and generally I think the security situation is improving as well.
Now, with the dynamism of global insecurity in which Nigeria is also a partaker, the Nigerian Police Force says it is deploying modern technologies as well as working with members of the public to mitigate any criminal activity in the country. Acting Inspector General Police Mohammed Adamu stated this during a meeting with officers in charge of Special Anti-Robbery and Anti-Kidnapping Squad at the Force Headquarters in Abuja.
These unprofessional actions have led to lack of confidence and trust in the police, and this impact on our crime prevention capacity. Any officer that is involved in extrajudicial killing and abuse of power will be held accountable for his or her action and risks losing his job and facing criminal prosecution.
Nigeria and Angola have agreed to increase cooperation in areas of trade, investment, security and economic diversification. This followed the meeting between Nigeria's Foreign Affairs Minister Jeffrey Onyema and his Angolan counterpart Manuel Augusto in Abuja.
The close cooperation between our two countries that have a lot in common. Big oil producing countries and rich in other mineral resources and great potential, but at the moment, of course, facing economic challenges and the need for economic diversification.
So we must give content to this instrument of strengthening our bilateral relations.
Nigeria's joined global action for renewed increased coordination to combat all forms of forced labor through Alliance 8.7. This global agenda launched in Abuja by the tripartite partners at a national consultative workshop is for all enterprise to obey national laws for the attainment of zero tolerance to factors leading to forced labor.
At the heart of ILO's various intervention and decent work agenda in Nigeria, the ILO believes that productive employment and decent work are key elements to achieving a fair globalization and poverty reduction.
We have to join forces to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals.
We look to continue to partner and accelerate progress in West Africa and Nigeria.
Meanwhile, the Senate has confirmed the nomination of Abike Dabiri-Erewa for appointment as Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission.
Having screened and after a careful scrutiny of the curriculum vitae and other accompanying documents of the nominee, she is therefore suitable and qualified for the position.
I think she has done credibly well in discharging her duty given to her by the President of this great country of ours.
And the level of questions and the responses made by Honorable Abike Dabiri were on point.
And wish her a successful tenure and a great ambassador for the country.
The House of Representatives says all ministries, departments and agencies of government found to have violated the Treasury single account policy of the present administration should be sanctioned accordingly. This followed part of adopted recommendations by the House as contained in the report of an ad hoc committee set up to ascertain the proceeds of TSA for enhanced transparency and accountability.
Over 2.9 trillion has occurred to the federal government Treasury single account within 6 months of operation. This led Nigerians to ask many questions, mainly bordering on the availability of funds to implement the federal budget and why borrowing continues.
Court of Appeal in Abuja has upheld the appeal of Governor Boyega Oyetola of APC in Osun State against the victory of Ademola Adeleke at the Election Petition Tribunal.
We are happy that today the minority judgment of the tribunal has become the majority judgment of the Court of Appeal. And we believe that this is another new dawn in our democratic journey.
We still have the right of appeal to the Supreme Court, which is the highest court of the land. We are not satisfied with the majority judgment as delivered, and we are exercising our right of appeal to the Supreme Court for the final determination of this issue of Osun State governorship election as said in 2018.
And that's the morning news. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kingsley and Kirian after the break.
I can taste the real chicken. Real chicken.
Don't worry, Abba. It's not your chicken.
It's the Sedap Supreme Chicken Essence that gives it the supreme chicken taste. Be Supreme, Nigeria. Be Supreme, Nigeria.
NTA Television College Jos announces admissions into 2-year diploma programs in film and television production, television engineering, and broadcast journalism. The sale of forms will commence on the 13th of May and run through 30th July 2019. Admission forms can be obtained from all marketing offices, NTA state capital stations, zonal centers, or at the office of the academic secretary, NTA Television College, Rayfield, Jos.
On payment of a non-refundable fee of 7,500 naira in bank draft in favor of NTA TV College. Applicants can also obtain the forms through the NTA TV College portal at www.ntatvc.edu.nj.
Applicants are required to possess 5 credits in GCE or SSCE in relevant areas of study in not more than 2 sittings, including English and mathematics. All properly completed forms attached with photocopies of credentials must be submitted on or before 30th July 2019. For further inquiries, please visit our website at ntatvc.com or call 0803-3144-383.
NTA TV College, training you to be the best you want to be.
Registrar, Announcer.
If you hear a bomb explosion or gunshots of an active shooter, that might be a terror attack. At such times, always remember 3 action words. Run, hide, report. Don't try to run towards the terror scene to save the situation, because there might be a second bomb blast or another attack. Run far away and take cover. Make sure you are safe first. Yes, it is in our nature to sympathize over the hurt, but remember, only trained personnel can help in such situations. When in a secured environment, promptly call relevant authorities and help will come. For anonymous reporting, call 09630-3250-5 or 0813-2222-106. If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
All right, welcome back. Now it's time for us to take some business stories with the National Bureau of Statistics getting its governing board, plus Nigeria Customs Service moving against smuggling in order to improve revenue generation. Our correspondent Kunle Adeyeye has details of these stories.
The precise data being churned out by the National Bureau of Statistics, which has facilitated sectoral development in updating and monitoring Nigeria's socio-economic indicators, has been strengthened following the inauguration of the governing board of the agency. Minister of Budget and National Planning, Udoma Udoma, whose ministry supervises the MBS, stressed that it has become imperative to complement the Bureau's efforts to achieve sustainable and cost-efficient activities. The minister implored the new board members to closely work with the management of the National Bureau of Statistics.
You will be able to ensure
that you keep on improving on the work of the NBS. So let me congratulate all of you once more for this appointment on our strong support for the work of the NBS. We've always given strong support. You're coming on board, you can count on even stronger support.
Chairman of the board, Dr. Kabiru Nakaura, pledged readiness of members to honorably discharge their duties as expected. The 15-member governing board comprises 6 political appointees and 9 institutional members, while the Statistician General of the Federation, Dr. Yemi Kale, will serve as secretary. Meanwhile, the Nigeria Customs Service has said it will improve its intelligence gathering to counter smuggling and boost its revenue generation. Comptroller General of Customs, Hamid Ali, disclosed that different agencies of government must unite and work with shared intelligence.
What we need to do is to put our heads together. If there's need for us to set up a small committee that will sit down and look at these problems and come up with a solution. But the most important thing is that we must agree to synergize. We must agree to synergize. We must agree to have a medium for exchange of information, real-time information, because that's the only one that can help us. But if we have a solid collaboration, whereby we can get the information and we know exactly what product is moving, then the tendency is that we'll be able to stop as many as possible.
With business news, I'm Kunle Adeyeye.
That's Kunle Adeyeye with the business package. And next on Good Morning Nigeria is newspaper review.
Our newspaper reviewer, Bayo Atobe, is right here with us in the studios for the review segment. Bayo, good morning and welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Bayo,
Good morning, Nigeria.
You're welcome.
Good morning, Nigeria.
And let's begin with the Daily Sun newspaper. Daily Sun, about the right-hand side of the newspaper, we have nobody can intimidate Supreme Court justices, says acting CJN. That story is on page 4. And of course, the lead story here is security challenges. Buhari talks tough, orders service chiefs to arrest situation and restore confidence. That is captured on page 6 of the Daily Sun. And then the photo story there is a Women Coalition for Inclusion of Women in Governance. And they were demonstrating, or rather protesting yesterday. Now, there are stories about the right-hand side of that photo story. Osho Goba, Oyetola wins at appeal court. PDP heads for Supreme Court on page 45. The CBN, Buhari renews Emefiele's tenure on page 2. Senate, invasion, reps recommendation for prosecution of Omar Agege, 6 others re-echoes. Yeah, the story is on page 41. That will be it for the Daily Sun front page this morning.
All right, so let's go over now to the Daily Trust newspaper. Daily Trust newspaper has as its lead story why Buhari reappointed Emefiele as CBN governor. And it has a rider, President's letter ends speculation as experts react. That story is on the front page with a jump to page 5. Why Buhari reappointed Emefiele as CBN governor. That's the list story. Now, below the name flag of the paper, you have 2 other headlines. How $8.4 million FIFA grant unsettles Nigeria's football. That's page 3 in greater detail. And on page 10, appeal court decides on Onoren's case today. Now, below the photograph on the front page, there are 3 headlines there. Magazine Gerin Daura still with kidnappers 9 days after. That's page 8. Adeleke heads to Supreme Court as Oyetola wins at appeal court. That's page 13. And NCC to launch second phase of SIM verification. That's page 16. And very quickly, before Bayo comes in, let's take a look at the Punch newspaper. Punch newspaper, the front page is pretty busy. Above the nameplate says NCC audits MTN, Glo, and others on SIM card registration. Mixed reactions greet Buhari's renomination of Emefiele, that's page 29. Nobody living or dead can influence Supreme Court's judgments, that's according to the acting CJN. And Dakwambo halts PDP governor's Dubai retreat, details on page 40. An earpiece beside the nameplate, bandits tax us before allowing us access to our farms. That's according to Northwest Farmers. Details of that story on page 2 of the Punch. Lead story, PDP asks appeal court president to leave presidential poll tribunal, with the rider says she is APC senator-elect's wife. Details on page 14. The photographs on the front page of the Punch show various traffic congestion scenes after a downpour in Lagos yesterday. And you have the story on Osun State there. The Lagos court members killed 4, dump bodies in septic tank. Kasuna Pupi kills colleague over girlfriend. That's on pages 4, 5, and 8. On page 13, U.S. hails Nigeria for extraditing alleged Pakistani drug dealer.
Let's start at the courts. Senator Ademola Adeleke has already instructed his counsels to proceed to appeal the ruling of the Court of Appeal yesterday that upheld the election of Boyega Oyetola. The Abuja division of the Court of Appeal nullified the judgment of the Osun State Governorship Election Tribunal. The tribunal in the petitions election governorship tribunal had in a 2-1 decision on March 22nd declared the PDP candidate Ademola Adeleke the winner. However, at the Court of Appeal, three judges and the presiding judge, making 4 of them, that gave the lead judgment, upheld Oyetola as elected. But the 5th member disagreed and upheld the verdict of the lower court. So at the lower court, it was 2-1. At the Court of Appeal, 4-1, and the finality will come at the Supreme Court. And at the Supreme Court, the acting Chief Justice of Nigeria says no human being, living or dead, could influence the judgment of the Supreme Court. And he says, he quoted this while receiving members of the asset management who had come on a courtesy call. And he said, Supreme Court justices were independently minded and are only answerable to their conscience and to God in writing and delivering judgments. He says, we take our time in taking notes and writing judgments to avoid making mistakes. We subject every case to intense debate, and during our conferences, we argue dispassionately and objectively as far as possible. He says that certainly we are only answerable to God Almighty because He is our owner of our lives. No human being, living or dead, can influence reasoning and judgment of Supreme Court of Nigeria. We are very independent because of the enormity of responsibility, trust and responsibility reposed on us by the Almighty God, the institution, and our dear nation. Talking about the infallibility of the Supreme Court, because it is the final authority, and therefore whatever it decides, you have to abide by it. But at the Court of Appeal, the People's Democratic Party has forwarded a petition challenging that the chairman of the 5-man panel and the current president of the Court of Appeal should rescue herself from being part of the panel. The petition signed by the party chairman, Uche Secondos, and the party secretary, Umoru Sauri, says that Adamu Bulkachua, husband to the president of the Court of Appeal and the presiding judge at the tribunal, contested and won Bauchi North Senatorial election in February 23rd election. Therefore, given her direct intimacy with your dear husband, your lordship would have exercised your constitutional right and powers to rescue yourself from being a member of the panel. They also add that they are more discomfited about her participation, especially taking cognizance of her remarks when she says specifically that complaints, no matter how an election was well conducted, there will always be some complaints. Those are the situations in the courts, and also today, 4 appeals put together will be heard in the case of former Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Walter Onogen. It is about the case of his assess declaration that has been ruled by the Code of Conduct Tribunal.
All right. Okay, thank you, Bayo.
I just wondering, this is probably not a matter for general, public debate because it's a bit specialized. His Lordship, the Acting Chief Justice, has indicated that nobody, living or dead, can influence the judgments of the Supreme Court. But, in jurisprudence, which is the science of law, there is a realism school which deals with the issues of this particular nature. So look, how is it that judges arrive at their decision? What are the issues? What are the influences? And so on and so forth. So it's a very elaborate matter. But on a public plane, what His Lordship has said, obviously, is it.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out at the end of the day, because what is important here is that after all said and done, the law will take its course and we'll get the results. Okay, now let's go to leadership newspaper of this morning, and below the nameplate, Nigerians must sleep with two eyes closed, PMB tells service chiefs. It's on page 7. And on page 2 is police rescue 27 kidnapped victims. Appeal Court affirms Oyetola as Osun governor on page 4. Now, the lead story on leadership newspaper this morning, for economic consolidation, PMB reappoints Emefiele for second term. Is on page 6. Of course, you say that there's a mixed reactions, through that reappointment. Well, we may have to also do some analysis on that. And now, at the foot of the leadership newspaper, we have one story here. I also believe we can also do some analysis on. I will not succumb to blackmail, Ngige tells NLC. It's on page 4. Federal government insists on autonomy for state legislatures and judiciary. Page 5 is where you get details of that story. And now, pastor, wife to die by hanging for killing husband. On page 48.
That's right. Well, we've read the stories on the president reappointing Emefiele for a second term, and the letter, of course, that he has sent to the Senate. Now, the Nigerian Pilot today doesn't have, if you take a look at the front page of the Nigerian Pilot, let's see that on the screen right away. You will see its lead story, of course, is on the Court of Appeal decision. You have other headlines there on the reps asking for the exemption of a number of institutions from TSA, and right down to the foot of the front page, the Nigerian Pilot doesn't have the story on Emefiele. And a couple of days ago on Good Morning Nigeria, Bayo, you remember we read from the Nigerian Pilot the lead story, which was speculative, insisting that President Muhammadu Buhari was not going to reappoint Emefiele. And
how did they get the assurances that it was not going to happen?
It's for them to indicate. But now that the president has forwarded the renomination letter to the Senate, we don't have the story on the front page.
Exactly. And sorry, like leadership captured it here, that for economic consolidation, there has already been an economic trajectory of the federal government, which Emefiele is part of those championing it, right? And for me and many others, he may have taken a very good decision based on the economy of the country.
Well, I think it's very unprofessional in the sense that if you have speculated based on some sources for which you felt were reliable, and now you found that the opposite is the case, you owe the public a duty to publish the correct situation now. 2 or 3 days ago, when they came with that headline, they were almost categorical that the president will not confirm the governor of the central bank for a second time. But this, the reading of the letter confirming him for a second time by the floor of the Senate has put all this to pay. So the governor of central bank is now second term designated, because it is subject to the confirmation of the Senate. However, in professional parlance, a pilot that is silent today ought to have published that confirmation on the floor of the Senate, and also explain to the public that it made an error when it, based on its sources,
or
the earlier said there was not going to be that confirmation.
They made a guesswork, but the guesswork cannot be...
Guesswork is not bad for public.
Exactly.
Part of journalism. And when in doubt, leave out.
The Nigerian Pilot goofed. There's no doubt about that. If you recall, Bayo, one of the writers to that headline was that Emefiele was the one that led the Nigerian economy into recession. And this is one thing. Key economic players often will watch out for certain kinds of appointment. Now, when it was announced several weeks ago that Ebefele's tenure would end in June, everyone was attentive as to the next kind of appointment that the president was going to make. Now, the president has renominated Ebefele. It shows confidence that there will be continuity with pre-existing policies, and therefore, the various players, can key into that, as it were.
You're on point, Kingsley, because one of the problems that's, of course, bedeviled this country in terms of policy articulation and policy implementation is that of discontinuing what has been laid as a foundation of growth. And if you find out on a Mefele's issue, when he came on board, Nigeria was already sliding, into difficult economic, situation.
In fact, Daily Trust categorically said that the president has confidence in him because of his defiant stand against calls to devalue the naira. Another explanation given by the paper was that he provided restriction on importation of 40 items from foreign exchange, and these are the issues that endeared him to the president. And the consequence of what Pilot will have done is that it has economic impact on the economy of Nigeria generally, because when you now speculate that the head of the Apex Bank is not likely to get confirmation, international investors in the country begin to be
let's see what happens next. You could have a run.
Exactly. We can have a try.
Speculation in journalism has its limits.
Another report this morning on the leadership newspaper that we like to look at is that I will not succumb to blackmailing, he tells NLC. But I'm just questioning, please, if I may, the picketing of the ministers, the residents. Not even official residents. Is it lawful to do that?
Picketing is part of the instruments of unionism.
But
I cannot guarantee whether picketing at the private residence is allowed. There are two conflicting information. There is information that talks on the side of the Honorable Minister were the ones that were assaulted the NLC. And the minister is also alleging that talks hired by the NLC were the one that also invaded his residence. And he, in fact, threatened to go to court.
His gate was blocked with a tanker, with two tankers that blocked his gate. Yes. Invariably, some analysts would say that they have impinged on his human right. I mean,
in fact, there's also a threat issued by the President of Nigeria Labour Congress that workers, wherever they sight the Honorable Minister around the country, airports, everywhere, they should accord him actions that are disrespectful. That is uncalled for. I think there should be a limit to which the NLC president is not only just the president of Nigeria Labour Congress, he's the president of the world body of trade union, and therefore every act of his must be seen to be in public scrutiny and must be in accordance with international best practices. We must call a spade a spade. The minister is asserting that going by the act of NISTF, he has a responsibility in appointing and nominating somebody who ought to be the chairman.
And who should be neutral, not from Labour, because you said that Labour already has 2 slots, and that has been filled, and well, let's see how it plays out,
Kyria and Bayo, you raised the question. What was the likely foreseeable consequence of taking 2 tankers laden with fuel, whether diesel, petrol, or kerosene, to the private residence of the Minister of Labour? He blocked not only his access, but he also blocked that of his neighbor. There is no filling station in that neighborhood. So, but why then would you use, as it were, weaponized tankers? So suppose something ignited.
Exactly. That would have been a different story.
There are ways that some of these matters can be handled. Now, assuming the minister is in disagreement with Labour, does Labour not have any other
avenues for? Yes.
Yes, there should. I think these are some of the things that should be explored. And the language that was used yesterday in the statement by Labour that workers, wherever, they find the Honourable Minister, they should accord him all forms of disrespect. That's like virtually placing a contract on the head of the Minister of Labour and Employment. It's unacceptable.
And the main thing here is that the issue is not an issue that concerns Labour that much. It's about headship of a board. Right. So what should concern other workers in Nigeria because of the board that has not been constituted? So why is he taking it too far? In any case, we'll see how that plays out in the long run, because I'm sure that serious attention will be paid to that.
Well, it is an executive action, and there are procedures for challenging that, and those procedures must be followed.
And on that note, we conclude the newspaper review for this morning. We'd like to appreciate Bayo Atoyabe for his analysis on today's edition of Good Morning Nigeria. Thank you, Bayo, for coming. Well, we'll see you again on Monday. This is GMN, the Good Morning Nigeria on NTA Network Service. We'll take a short break now, and when we return, we shall, of course, delve into the intricacies of community policing. Stay with us.
They are there at the crack of dawn. They are there busy preparing while we rise for our day. They are there silently, guarding, waiting, listening, and watching. They are there ready, in the sky above and the waters below, in the blistering heat of the day, in the dead of night, willing, indefatigable, determined in the defense of the sovereignty of our country. They are our first line of defense and our last. They who have paid the ultimate price in defending us. They are fathers and uncles. They are mothers and sisters and girlfriends and boyfriends. They are brothers and cousins and best friends and neighbors. They are classmates, colleagues, and citizens of this nation. They are our defenders and deserve our respect, our prayers, our thoughts. Nigeria, please support our armed forces.
We must get that trophy. It's the grand finale of the Trophy Five-a-Side Tournament, coming up on the 11th of May 2019 at the Campus Mini Stadium in Lagos Island. Over 3,000 fans across the country will have a chance to win a raffle ticket for an all-expense-paid trip to Tanzania, to be won by 4 lucky winners. Catch it all live on NTA Network, Kwese TV on UHF 32, and Channel 290 on your Kwese decoder. You can also download the Kwese iFlix on your mobile devices to stream live and get every bit of the action. Trophy Five-a-Side Field of Honor, brought to you by Kwese Free Sports, the official broadcast partners.
Do you desire to improve your grammar and sharpen your pronunciation skills? If your answer is yes, then you need to attend a special 4 weeks course on English Grammar and Pronunciation for Broadcasters organized by NTA Television College, Jos. The course will expose participants to the nitty-gritty of English grammar and usage, which will enable them speak fluently and write as well as edit scripts flawlessly. Journalists, presenters, scriptwriters, television and radio news editors, secretaries, masters of ceremonies, and hosts of live events will find the course highly beneficial. Date, 13th May to 7th June 2019. Venue, NTA Television College, Rayfield, Jos. Course fee, 100,000 Naira per participant. Accommodation inclusive. For more inquiries, please call 0803-3144-383 or 0806-9809-807. You can also visit our website on www.ntatvc.com. NTA Television College, Jos, training you to be the best you want to be.
And now, to kickstart our discussion this morning, let's first of all take this background report put together by our correspondent, Victor Azu.
Every country of the world has its fair share of security challenges and deals with them as it would. Over the years, Nigeria has had to battle different forms of crime and criminality. In recent times, a surge in crimes ranging from kidnapping to banditry, armed robbery and insurgency, to mention a few, has led to talks of how best to combat these challenges. In this regard, community policing has been an often mentioned system, as it is a strategic collaboration between the police and the people in intelligence gathering and other crime mitigation strategies. Already, this system is being practiced in about 18 states of the Federation with relative success, prompting President Muhammadu Buhari to direct the Acting Inspector General of Police to fully implement this strategy in all parts of the country. The question now is, how best should community policing strategies be deployed in Nigeria for maximum impact? Guests on Good Morning Nigeria are set to provide answers.
And joining us in the studios now to begin this conversation, let's welcome Yahaya Abubakar. He is the Commissioner of Police in charge of community policing. Shipi Abubakar, pleasure to have you with us, and good morning, Nigeria.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. And also here with us in the studios is, of course, our regular guest on security matters. Kabiru Adamo is a security risk management expert. Madam Kabiru, pleasure to have you on the program.
The pleasure is mine, Ramadan Kareem.
Yeah, same to you.
Right. In the studio with us is Kemi Okendo, your team leader, Nigeria Policing Program, and the Executive Secretary, Partners Africa. Madam, you're welcome to GMN.
Good morning.
Well, and we also have from Jos, Kingsley, we have from Jos Network Center, Professor Tanibi Alemike, I hope I got that correctly, a professor of criminology and a member, Presidential Advisory Committee on Anti-Corruption. It's a pleasure to welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria today, Prof.
Morning.
All right, well, I hope the audio is okay to Jos. Professor Alemike, of course, is one of our regular resource persons, you know, on security issues, in particular on police and policing matters. Yeah. But let's begin by having a conceptual understanding of what community policing is all about and how it might be related or distinguished from other concepts. So, beginning with CP Yahaya Abubakar, what is community policing?
Thank you very much. Community policing, as the notion sounds, is basically policing in partnership with communities. In other words, it should be community-driven security strategy to identify security problems within a community in order to resolve it, working together with the communities. Of course, we all know the notion of democracy. We've been practicing democracy in this country for about 20 years now. So the popular definition of democracy is government of the people, for the people, by the people. In my own opinion, community policing simply means community policing for the people, by the people, and of the people. In other words, it is grassroots policing.
Okay.
Is that self-help?
Not self-help.
Okay.
Community in partnership, consultation, and interdependency with the community. Police as an institution working together with the community to identify security problems in the community and then resolving them.
Well, I think as we make progress, since we will also go into some other perspectives of the conversation. But now let's bring in Madam here to tell us, there are concepts of community policing and also patterns, with certain peculiarities with respect to what happens in what areas, because of course we have, different types of crimes here and there. To you, what is community policing?
I'll follow up from what the CP has said and try to provide a bit of clarification. Community policing is having the people at the center of the policing architecture. So it's not regime policing. The police is not answerable to the regime, to the state. The people of the citizens have to be in the center. It's people focused, it's citizens driven, which means that the priority for public safety security should look at the priority of the people that you're trying to protect. And the reason this is so is because from the history, policing follows the political architecture of a place. As we got into a democracy and democratic philosophy is to have the people at the center of governance. It's the same thing with community policing. So it stands on, in Nigeria, I would say presently with the directive from August 2015, it stands on 3 legs: community engagement, accountability, communication. And this 3 feeds into intelligence gathering. So you have a scenario where policing is driven from the grassroots. At the grassroots level, at the lower level, people are consulted about their policing needs and strategies are put in place to address those needs. And it builds like that on layers.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Kemi Okeyendo. Just before we bring in Kabir, I would like us to go to Jos. where Kirian earlier introduced Professor Etanibi Alemika, Professor of Criminology, and as we said, he's an expert on police and policing issues. Professor Alemika, tell us, what is community policing and how might it be distinguished from concepts that are similar?
Thank you. Maybe we need to go back to what is policing. Policing basically refers to measures taken by communities, by societies, by countries to ensure safety, and also by mobilizing available resources within those communities to respond to threats to safety. If we take that policing as that, then community policing means measures within communities and taken by communities, including governmental and non-governmental segments of communities to ensure public safety. So basically, it is mechanisms for ensuring peace, safety, and security in society. While police can be identified, policing is carried out by different organizations, different groups within society. Let me give a note of warning. I think there is quite a lot of excitement about community policing in Nigeria. Community policing is not a technology that you buy and start applying. Secondly, community policing is not new. That is where indeed society emerged. Society emerged from ensuring that safety and peace were maintained. Over time, that role became professionalized in the police, and members of the community went about doing their business, having recruited people to do the job for them. In the last 3 decades, especially in the United States, there is this understanding that measures that were taken in the early 60s to take police out of the community as part of the civil rights movement, complaint and the rest of them, alienated police from the community. And there was need to reinsert police back to community. And that is where the whole idea of community policing now seems to be new in the last 3 decades. Otherwise, in 1829, Robert Peel, in about 11 principles, about 5 of them were actually directed to the role of community in policing, and in fact, why policing without the community would be inefficient.
All right, Kingsley, he has indeed made a lot of sense. There's a reference that he made, in 1829, saying that policing has been with the society. Because where I come from, the locality where I come from, growing up, the people are the police. If you're a bad person who will detect you, come to your house physically and warn you. We still do it up to date. So that's why I have to, link that to.
Did they warn you?
It's you that I. All right, but the question I want to ask Kabiru to address is this. At the introductory part of this program, Kingsley and I had a chat over the issue of having some ancillary organizations in different states of the country. It's about 18 states now, which of course some may refer to as the community policing. So we want to get our own concept of community policing, taking into cognizance, what exists now that people are now referring to as the community policing in 18 states of Nigeria.
Okay, as far as I know, President Obasanjo, if I'm right, in 2004 introduced the concept of community policing, and there was a model trial in about 7 states. So I'm not too sure how you got the figure of 18. Perhaps along the way it was expanded to those 18. We've had the benefit of looking at those 7 states where it was introduced to ask ourselves, has it been successful? What are the challenges? What are the issues that militated against the introduction of community policing in those 7 states? And like you rightly pointed out, the Nigerian police as it stands today is not the only organization that is implementing policing functions within the country. We also know, for instance, that the other organizations that are supporting the police, unfortunately, either do not understand the concept of community policing or have not even introduced community policing as it were, as a concept. Then we should also consider the fact that the whole essence of community policing is to improve internal security. And if we agree today that internal security is probably at its lowest ebb, then we will now agree that the model of those 7 states have not worked effectively. There are challenges that are inherent within the police itself, and then there are challenges that go outside the police. Some of them are policy, some of them are at the legal level, and then some of them have to do with the structural formation of the Nigerian security architecture that perhaps in the course of our discussions we will look at those issues. But I think the bottom line is that the attempt to introduce community policing as a model for tackling crime and other security challenges in the country has not worked efficiently in Nigeria from 2004 till date. I think it's instructive to also mention that President Buhari has given, I would say, the political leadership for the commencement of community policing. We know that he started by instructing the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies to come up with a research paper, if I remember well, course 40 of 2018. And that document they presented to him served as the starting point for the directive he gave the acting Inspector General of Police. And the police is working closely with the Office of the National Security Advisor and the Secretary to the Government of the Federation. Just last week, or early this week, a committee has been set up by the Secretary to Government of the Federation to work on the framework for establishing community policing. So lessons have been learned from the 7 model states, and we're hoping that as we progress in the course of discussion, we'll look at those issues.
All right, Madam Kabir, thank you very much. I want to return to Commissioner of Police, Yahya Abubakar. Again, still trying to understand the concept. What my colleague Kirian was talking about as to what happened in communities, in a sense, it's similar to what you call civil defense, even though there is a body now, known by a very long name, but it's civil defense, that civilians who are organizing themselves to defend their communities. I saw a bit of that during the civil war in Benin City, about Benin, where at night the fathers and those who were old enough, were assigned watch functions, over their particular neighborhoods. That was like civil defense. But we have also heard and seen in Nigeria what is called PCRC, that is Police Community Relations Committee. How is that different from community policing?
Well, I think the concept of community policing has been maybe misunderstood or maybe is been misconceived. You use the word defense, community defense. I think that word is also misplaced, because the word defense connotes something like a belligerence, like a war situation. In policing, we're talking about crime management and public safety. That we're talking about the essence of policing, how to keep our communities safe. Now, the kind of policing we've been practicing before in this country has all along been traditional concept of policing, traditional model, which is basically reactive. When an incident occurs, police will be called, they respond, they make arrest, they detain somebody in police station, they investigate, then they prosecute. All is basically law enforcement based and reactive. Now, the concept of community policing is proactive. Now, they want the police to work together with the community, like I said, community-driven security strategies. Community policing is a philosophy, a value system, and also a strategy of dealing with crime situations in the communities. Now, the idea of community policing comes out because the traditional method has found not to be working. The public perception of the police is at its very lowest ebb. Crime situation is escalating in the country, you understand? Now, we now have to go back to the drawing board and then see what other alternatives can we use to deal with these situations. In 2004, like the last speaker has said, specifically on the 27th of April 2004, the former President Olusegun Obasanjo formally launched community policing in Nigeria, in Enugu. From then it became a policy for Nigeria police to implement community policing. Now, like I said, that is the best concept we can apply in the present situation. And it's not only in Nigeria, globally. That is the current trend now in the security situations and
what is
public
the
management.
difference, question, what is the difference between community policing, as you have explained,
yes,
and police community relations committee.
Okay. PCRCs, these are structures that work together. They emanate from the communities. Police community relations committees. The members of this, the composition of these PCRCs are members of the community. Road Transport Workers Union, traditional rulers, other civil society organizations in the society, prominent leaders, vigilante groups, neighborhood watch. All these are people that comprises of PCRCs. Now, from these people, since they work with the police, we get intelligence from them, we get information from them. They also, as something comes up, they assist the police in getting to the root of these problems. In other words, it's also a structure in the framework of community policy.
No, all right. So, which means in the long run, you might have to expand your horizon, because of course we're trying to see how we can rejuvenate community policing.
Exactly.
It's been launched, as you say, in 2004. Exactly. I personally, was there on the day of the launch. But what baffled me along the line is that it didn't happen. It was not effective. What came out was this PCRC that you're talking about, which of course has been ineffective, in terms of what community policing should be doing. But let me ask you this question, because you said to one word or two words, going back to drawing board. That brings us an issue of inadequate research whenever a policy, is being propounded, by a government or being approved, for implementation. Now, we don't seem to be carrying out some kind of a multi-methodological research to know whether a policy can work in the first place. It's a kind of, if you like, a prognosis. Right. So now, what are the indicators, which will be pointing at the fact that this time around, community policing will be more effective and efficient to tackle the various criminalities and banditry or what have you across the nation?
Okay. Let me say, to start with, not just a community policing. Any policy at all, for any other reason whatsoever, for it to work, there must be commitment. There must be commitment, there must be political will, there must be concerted effort to make sure that it works. Any policy you take, if it is just flash affair, just try it and then abandon it, it's not going to work by itself. There must be concerted effort. There must be strategies. There must be implementation plans. There must be action plans. There must be training.
Can we share in the studies you tend to put in place now? Because we are talking about the workability of this policy. What are those strategies that you're going to put in place now to make it effective this time around?
Already we have, like I said, since 2004, 15 years ago now, we have 5 senior officers who have been taken abroad for a study tour in the UK and in Houston, Texas, in the US. Officers have been trained. They came back and trained other senior police officers here in Nigeria. We have thousands of police officers who have been trained properly in concept of community policing. Many commissioners of police in the charge of commands presently have been trained in community policing. Area commanders, even divisional levels, have been trained. Like Mr. Kabiru has just mentioned, that at that time, after launching, there are about 7 pioneer states, pilot states, so to speak, where these policies had been tested. And it was working. Later, it was expanded to about 18 states in the country. Presently, community policing has been practiced by many of our officers, from divisional level up to the federal level. At the federal level here, we have what is called Community Policing Management Team. Headed by the chairman of that team is the DIG in charge of Research and Planning Department. DIG Amin Shibara.
Yeah, Commissioner of Police, Yahya Abubakar.
Yes.
The question that often will arise from what you have indicated, you say community policing has been on and it is working. Was President Muhammadu Buhari speaking ex nihilo? Was he speaking that he didn't know that community policing had been in existence? Was he sufficiently briefed? Why is he not just giving what would seem to be fresh marching orders? My question, therefore, is going to Mrs. Kemi Okeyendo. What do we know about the outcome of the pilot community policing in the initial 7 states and the interface between that effort and the PCRC, which I mentioned, civil defense, and other formal structures of the security architecture?
Thank you. I would say that one of the challenges we have in the country is that we do not learn from each other. So there is a sense that organizations that are not part of government do not have anything to offer government. And the pilot for community policing in the country has been basically championed by development partners, particularly the UK government, working closely with some civil society groups in the country. There have been studies looking at the gaps and identifying lessons to be learned so that it's fed back into a process. And what I see, having been part of the process since inception, is that we always tend to want to start all over again. We do not policy, and there's no continuity in leadership in the country. So what were the issues identified? I'll first start with access to justice. Access to justice, when access to justice came on board from '99, access to justice launched community policing in the country. And access to justice was implemented, I think, in about 6 states, 1 state in each geopolitical zone. A lot of research, background work, training of police, and the concentration was on the Nigeria police force, without taking cognizance of a mapping of the public safety security environment to determine who are the stakeholders within the public safety security environment. The police is just one of such stakeholders. The Police Community Relations Committee is not a setup of, is not an outcome of the launch of community policing. The PCRC had been there for years, and the platform for PCRC at that time was to serve as a bridge between the community and the police. However, it became elitist and it is membership driven. So the average man on the street who is not a member of PCRC does not have access to the PCRC. Then you could also say, if you look at the way PCRC is run, PCRC mainly became like a fundraising pattern for physical support. So there are gaps in the police that they identify. They don't have enough resources as per fuel. They help to provide fuel. There's need for computers. They help to provide computers. So these are hardcore kind of engagements. But then you ask, when you're talking about policing issues that affect the average man on the street, then you're supposed to be looking at a scenario where there should be a platform for engagement that normal people, the woman selling abacha on the street, should have access to that platform. It's not supposed, if it's properly organized, membership would be fluid. You might have a leadership structure so that it's coordinated and organized. However, membership will be fluid based on issues being discussed. Because once my own issues are sorted out, most likely I might not come for the next meeting, right? But then when we went into SJG, SJG now looked at policy environment.
What is SJG?
Security Justice Growth. Security Justice Growth Program took over from the Access to Justice Program. And then Security Justice Growth Program paid a lot of attention to policy environment because they also noticed that there were challenges in the framework. So the policy framework, the legal framework. And that's where you started the work on the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act. The work on the police bill that is ongoing all started on that platform, that, okay, if one of the gaps is enabling framework, let's see how we can, provide the enabling framework. When the Security Justice Growth Program started, it went into the Justice for All program. Justice for All program, building on the past 8 years of the other program, tried to fuse everything together. In all of this, I'll identify some of the good things that happened. So one of the good things that happened was that the Community Policing Office was created in the force headquarters, right? Then you were able to get community policing as a line item into the budget of the police. First step, good step, but that is not the end. Because what now happened is that community policing was now seen as a project in the police, not a whole of institution approach to policing. So within that, you had teams that were set up in the police force that were tasked, that were trained and tasked with the responsibility of implementing community policing. This crop of officers at times were referred to as elite cops. They were not doing policing work, to be precise. So even within the institution, absorption of community policing as a philosophy that drives everything within the police is lacking till date. That is the next step where we need to get to. Then you look at it below, as you come down. Community policing would need an element of devolution of powers, which means that CPs, DPOs, area commanders would need to be able to take information, get information from their locality, address these issues, and work with it, and do not necessarily need to be looking at their I'll call them their line managers for nods of yes or no on what to do.
All right, Mrs. Okeyedo, thank you very much. Some of the points that you have raised in the latter part of your contribution, we will return to in terms of structure and operational modalities of community policing. But just in case Professor Alemika has a word or two on how policing community had fared under the pilot scheme and why it tended to have fizzled out, and now the sudden interest. You listened to Mrs. Okeyedo there. What are your comments? What worked and what didn't work, and therefore what are the lessons?
Thank you. I think Kemi has given the background to the evolution of the concept of community policing, that for most of its history in Nigeria thus far, it was driven by donors, especially the UK DFID, and not by Nigerian government. When people refer to the launching in 2004, that was true. That was done in Sheraton in Abuja at a workshop organized by the police under the leadership of Etafa Balogun. That conference was organized with the Clean Foundation. At that point, Kemi, Ms. Okeyedo, who was there, was a staff, a senior staff of the Clean Foundation. It was in the opening address that Obasanjo remarked that community policing was launched. But interestingly, 2 years later, in 2006, the same President Obasanjo constituted a panel, a police reform panel, led by Damadami, retired DIG. One of the terms of reference of that committee was to consider, the modality for adopting and adapting community policing. That means between 2004, where it was verbally proclaimed, and 2006, there was still no adoption of that as a government philosophy for policing Nigeria. Of course, that repeated itself in 2008. Thus far, until this time, there hadn't been a very strong, high-level commitment to adoption of community policing as government philosophy or the state philosophy for policing. I think that is one of the things that have been missing. It's been a lot of people walking through either the funders, the DFID programs, the Nigeria police, try to implement this in the field. But now that we are coming to a point where we must first determine, is community policing philosophy good for Nigeria? Should it be adopted? When it is adopted, what will be the character of that community policing? I think government now will have a responsibility to both implement and to monitor, to evaluate. Again, we must understand that community policing, the CP rightly said, that is proactive. And he said before, we are traditional. It is not either or. It is not either community policing or traditional policing. What happens is, in community policing, there is the preventive aspect, and the other one, there is reactive. For effective policing, you need both parts. You need to integrate them together. Arrest will not stop under community policing. Investigation will not stop. Intelligence gathering will not stop. But on the contrary, I think the key to community policing is the fact that there's a disaggregation of concern. What is of concern to somebody who lives in Jos in terms of insecurity may not be the same as the person in Enugu and in Lagos. And as Kemi mentioned, there will be devolution of power in such a way that the Commissioner of Police in Jos can define what constitutes threat to security in Plateau State, not necessarily by the IG. All he needs to do is to say, this is what is happening in my domain. This are the plans that I have for countering it, and he sees the endorsement of the IG, rather than IG calling them to Abuja and say, go back to your state and do the following. And how do you then know what are the security concerns in Plateau? It means that the police and the community must sit together and say, what are our security concerns? That means we are observing in this place new development of behavior among youth, among men. What do we need to do before this problem become a major issue that we are not able to address? And they come about solution, to it collectively. And I think it's the collective, the partnership between the police and the community that is a bedrock of community policing, followed by the fact that there is a devolution of power, that even on the beat, a police officer has more discretion to act than is the case now. In terms of structure, of course, there are all kinds of variation. And in the last 3 decades that it's been effectively used or adopted across the countries, there have been a lot of modification. So there isn't one packet of community policing. It's dynamic, and society must respond to the philosophy of community policing partnership. That is essentially the underlying principle of community policing, the partnership between the community and the policing in defining their concern, and of course in identifying solutions to them and jointly implementing them. And there will be dynamic. This will be dynamic. And as we think of community policing in Nigeria, as I continue to warn, it does not mean technology that you just go and buy and you drop in the police system and it will work. It does not also mean ethnic policing, because when I hear people discuss it in Nigeria, they think policing means that ethnic people will police their area. It does not mean that. It is actually resident based. That means people who live in the community, irrespective of their sex, irrespective of their age, irrespective of the socioeconomic status, will define their concern about security or insecurity. So we need to understand the basic nuances and the ever-changing dynamics of the concept itself or the philosophy. Otherwise, we may be again in a situation where we think it's one philosophy that has been fully established and does not change. And I think the police particularly need to be very careful, because it's going to be accused of not being functional if in 2-3 years' time we didn't get right what are the basic pattern and the changes that have occurred over the last 3 decades.
Right, that's an interesting analysis from Kemi Okendo and of course Professor Alemike as far as this issue is concerned. And one thing he rightly pointed out is the fact that it is the synergy between the community and the police, that form the bedrock of a community police. But before we go on break, please, I would like to bring in Kaibiru Adamo here, who's a security risk management expert. Now, what I want to ask is this, is community policing going to change the basic functions of the police? I ask this because, we want to know what should be the contemporary organizational change within the police, that can drive effective and efficient community policing.
Community policing is not going to replace police functions. All the functions that the police is carrying out, investigation, arrest, traffic control, and all that will continue. But the organizational change that is required is one that will now involve the community. And I think that is what we've been discussing. Every respondent has mentioned the philosophy itself, which changes the current top-bottom approach to a new philosophy that introduces the bottom-top approach, so that every member of the society participates, well, not every member, every law-abiding member of the society. I think it's very important to emphasize that point. Every law-abiding member of the society can participate in the policing function. The structural changes that are required, with the benefit of hindsight, like Mrs. Kemi has mentioned, one of the greatest challenges, which perhaps is a progress, but also created its own challenges, that in some police formations, a community policing department was established. And as far as that formation was concerned, it has achieved community policing. Now, unfortunately, that's, I think, a mistake on that part, because the whole essence of having that community policing department is to engage with the community and embrace whatever contributions the community have. And I think that is where we saw errors or faults in terms of the implementation in previous times. But I want to emphasize the point that the current discourse that we're having is being approached probably with the establishment of a framework according to the current government. And I like the fact that 3 critical institutions have been brought together: the police itself, the Office of the National Security Advisor, and then to the Secretary to Government of the Federation. We are hoping that all of this will tie in with what the National Assembly has done, which is the new bill on police trust fund, as well as the police reform bill. Now, all of this is important because at the end of the day, we looked at the structure that was established within the police formations, funding sources for even running community policing itself, and then the mindset that is needed to be changed within the police itself. So hopefully, within that framework, all of this would be captured. If the mistakes of the past are repeated, in other words, the philosophy that allows the run of community policing from top to bottom is maintained within the framework, then we would still come back and have this discussion. But hopefully, especially given the magnitude of the security challenges we have at the moment, those that are driving the establishment of that framework understand that this is an opportunity to change the current setup, then perhaps we'll have some success there.
All right, Madam Kabir Adamu, and indeed the other guests, we are taking a short break now. When we return, we'll proceed with other aspects of the conversation.
Chief. Good morning, sir. You're here already?
No, now my spirit day, my body day for house. What kind of question is that? Were you not the one that fixed this meeting for 8 a.m.? You are now coming by 10 a.m. and start asking me jab questions.
But Chief, now, I'm sorry. Don't you also go late for meetings sometimes? You know now, African time.
No more African time. And no more pancaking of face during office hours. At the end of the day, we will lose valuable time. We will not make progress. If we want to move this nation forward, we must treat business as business and respect time. Change begins with me.
Thank you, sir. I'm sorry. Can we go for the meeting now, Chief?
Later.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We still have all our 4 guests, Professor Alemika in our Just Network Center, then CP Yahya Abubakar right here with us in Abuja, Kabir Adamu, and Mrs. Kemi Okayando. Let's return to the Commissioner of Police in charge of community policing. Give us a sense of the structure of this community policing that we are likely to have. And therefore, dealing with the structure, let's also have a sense of the powers and operational competence.
Okay, in terms of the structure, just like the Prof has said from Jos and Kemi, they have given a very good background of the history of community policing, how it started in this country, and the work that has been done so far. Clean Foundation has been very, very much involved in this project, along with other donor agencies from UK and the US. Professor Alemika himself has been very, very helpful to the Nigeria police in this regard. Now, in terms of the structure of community policing, just like what Kemi has said, the problem we have, or we seem to be having, is like this concept has not been taken as a complete paradigm shift in the entire organizational thinking and mindset. It has to be institutionalized. It has to be owned up by the government itself, federal government itself. And fortunately for us now that the federal government has taken interest in this model of policing, I believe the whole process is going to be very, very much implemented, very, very much alive, and we are going to see a lot of activities in this regard, both within the Nigeria Police Force itself, as well as from the side of the federal government. Already, like I said, we have established internal structures. These donor agencies have already assisted the Nigeria Police Force in terms of training and capacity building of its personnel. Many officers have been trained and they are very competent in this regard. We have set up some internal structures like community policing management teams at the federal level, which have been replicated at the zonal level and at the state command level. All CPs have been enjoined, have been directed to ensure that these community policing principles, they should be using their desk officers who are already in the command established some few years ago to be working with the community to ensure that these community people have been, enlightened
Kemi
to implement this community policy.
talked about the fact that, yes, the police had its community relations or community policing department, yes, but then they tended to have become an elite corps. That once you establish it...
that's PCRC, that's what you're saying. PCRC become an elite corps, not community policing desk. Kemi,
yes, let's have your take.
Both became an elite corps. So yes, within the community policing department, you had officers that were posted there and were seen not to be doing corps policing work.
Madam, you've already made this comment earlier on.
Yes.
And
I was just seeking clarification from the CP.
What Kemi did say is that the department is there, is existing, but dysfunctional, so to speak.
Because the principles is not mainstreamed across the institution. So you have like 2 officers or desk that have about maximum 5-6 officers in the unit at force headquarters. At the divisional level or at the state command level, some state commands have community policing units, some don't have,
All right, and that brings us to the issue you earlier highlighted in one of your comments, in which you said that the community is central, it is the nucleus of any successful community policing. And CP is here to tell us what he's been doing with the community in terms of ensuring effectiveness and efficiency of whatever concept that are coming up with now. But my question is, now, what are the factors really that shape citizens' willingness to participate in police programs designed to improve public safety? And I ask this because it is important for us to know whether citizens' procedural justice assessment influence their willingness to participate in the first place.
From experience, Nigerians are willing to participate. You just need the opportunity to participate. And one of the things we've done under the Nigerian policing program over the past 2 years has been introducing the concept of development of a state policing plan, because there needs to be a framework in which they are feeding into. So at the states where we're working, we did a stakeholder analysis with the police and NSCDC, and in some cases with the military, because in Borno, the military is actively involved. So when you do a stakeholder analysis of the public safety security environment, you identify the people that would be there. And you come as low down as even CDCs and market association and all whatnot. And what we did with them was to help them develop a framework to gather the information from these people. Once the information was gathered and the policing plan was in place, the plan had to be validated and then helped the people to set up a monitoring system It's that monitoring system that they use that we now fed into PCRC to try and PCRC being one of the mechanics to help now hold police accountable and hold like two-way dialogues between them. We came further down at the divisional level and helped some divisions develop their own local policing plan. Because what you will see as strategic engagement at the state level will not be the same thing at the divisional level. And I can give an example. In Lagos, for example, they itemize like SGBV, sexual gender-based violence issues as a priority issue in Lagos. Kidnapping was identified. But when you got to places like Ikorodu, they were more concerned about land matters. So what you now term as cultism in Ikorodu, as at times a root cause of it are Omoniles fighting on land. Then you saw the issue, then in Lagos we started seeing the issue of students gangsterism, which police within the system we've now labeled as cultism, right? And this was as flowed down as secondary schools and primary schools. Whereas if you look at it on the state level, you'll be targeting tertiary institutions. But you take it, the closer you bring it down to the people and you get their inputs into it, they identify the real issues that are prevalent to them. When I was at CLEAN, when we used to conduct national crime safety surveys, there was a year that discussing, we say priority crimes, armed robbery, kidnapping, but when the survey was carried out, theft of mobile phone was the predominant one, because coming from the citizens' perspective. So part of it is having multiple mechanisms that can help you gauge the perception and the thoughts of the different clusters that you're dealing with. And then you highlight, prioritize them on how you would deal with them with the available resources.
All right, Mrs. Okendo, thank you very much. That survey you carried out obviously was after 2001 when mobile phones became commonplace.
Yeah.
Otherwise, before then, I'm sure very few persons would steal your Motorola if you were not 9-not. I believe so. Okay, now, but more seriously, I will seek some clarification from that's Professor Alemika in our Just Network studios. Professor Alemika, look, what is the structure of community policing? Yeah, we keep talking about having community policing as a department in the police or as a unit. Now, the community members, is it everybody who can just stroll in? How does the community then organize itself to interface with the police? And much more seriously, what will be the powers and operational competence of the community policing? Or the community police, you know, if I will use that loosely.
Thank you. Community policing starts by emphasizing beat patrol. That means there will be street-based police officers. In that case, they come in contact with all the citizens that live on the street. They will also be neighborhood-based officers. That means they have constant contact with people who live within the neighborhood. That is indeed the beginning of community policing. We must have police return on beats, on streets, and in communities, working with the people, addressing their concern at those levels. That is where community policing begins, but on the street and in the neighborhood. And one other aspect of that is that the officer that is on the street and is in the neighborhood is not posted out every 6 months. He's going to be there on very long-term basis, such that he's able to, gain the confidence of the community members, is able to also influence what goes on within the community. That is on the personal officer level. In a neighborhood, generally there will be a mechanism where there will be forum for consultation. You might call that community policing forum, where the neighborhood comes together maybe on quarterly basis to identify are there changes in the concern that we identified last year. what should be our new priority? What are the challenges we are facing in implementing what we've jointly agreed with the police? That again is another level of community policing in terms of structure. It starts from officer on the beat, interacting with the citizen, then a forum at the local level where there is opportunity for people to express what is going on within the community. Then, of course, you need regular, as Kemi pointed out, community policing also demand that on an annual basis you have a survey or a mechanism for determining what is of concern to the people, what are the challenges in operating with those communities. And it is not just the police that is bringing resources. The communities also have resources that can help in indeed solving crime problem within the locality. And therefore, these resources are brought together. So there is principle of equal partnership. Once you solve this local level, then you begin to talk of the structures of the police. How will police respond beyond posting an officer there, beyond leaving him there or her there for 5-6 years, or even 10-15 years? How will they manage the community policing forum? These are the issues that the divisional police command will begin to address, from the desk officer there. And then, of course, it grows to the state command, and from the state command to the national level. So there is a lot needs to be done about organizational changes, which also go, as Kabiru mentioned, with the devolution of power. That means an officer who is on the street cannot say, I'm going back to the command to take instruction about how to deal with the request of the citizen. The one in the neighborhood will not have to go back to the division. So the officer on the street are given greater discretion under very professional supervision to exercise that discretion. So that is where the structure begins until you bring it to the level of the state command and the state level. But let me just say that there is on ground, and that is the committee that was inaugurated, I think, early this week, is to set out all of these, many of the questions we are asking now. That is their responsibility, to set out those issues. What would the structure look like? What would be the mode of engagement with the different stakeholders? And, of course, the different interest group. Again, thinking of community, there are different dimensions of the term community. In some cases, community means a geographical location. Sometimes it means an interest communities. For example, teachers, to which I belong. Sometimes it's to traders. Sometimes it's to business people. So the community is also not just residential. It's sometimes also an interest community. And these are the things that community policing is supposed to address, both to draw resources from them and also to serve them better.
Right. We are really getting to some conclusions as far as this issue is concerned with respect to what should be done to have an effective community policing. But let's turn to Kabiru Adamu this time around. Now, the level and pattern of crime, varies dramatically too from one state or community, as the case may be, to the other. Now, which may mean that different approaches should be required to address the peculiar, crimes, being committed at different places. Mrs. Okeyendo also mentioned something like that, because what happens here as a criminal act may not be the same in the other place. Should there be different approaches to community policing?
The philosophy itself is the same. The likelihood that the structure itself too would be the same, but the policing functions, investigation, name them, crime fighting, would now mean different approaches. Clearly, if you have a case of gang violence or cultism, and then you have banditry in the other sense, or even a more organized crimes, or even terrorism, the approach cannot be the same. But in terms of the overarching function, which is the gathering of intelligence using community-based resources, it would probably be the same. But then how does the police respond after that? It's also very critical. I think we need to recognize and admit this fact that it is not only the Nigerian police force that is implementing policing functions within the country. How do you bring in these other organizations, to an extent, including the military, because the reality of our Nigerian situation at the moment is that the military is carrying out some policing functions. So do they also need to embrace these elements of community policing? We are at that early stage where I think this discussion should be expanded, and I'm very happy with the approach by especially the Secretary to Government of the Federation. All of these stakeholders that we've mentioned, hopefully they will be brought in, because remember, the objective of community policing is to improve internal security, and once we bring in all of these stakeholders together, hopefully that objective will be met.
Well, Madam Kabir, I mean, thanks a lot. The question my colleague asked is a very pertinent one, because sometimes, assuming community policing is a rudimentary level of policing, some persons would argue, yes, that could be more effective when you are dealing with social vices, which are not necessarily crimes. Although, of course, from social vices, they could then graduate to become crimes. But even crimes, you have different categories: petty offenses, and then serious offenses, to the much more catastrophic ones we are dealing with now: banditry, kidnapping, and terrorism. Have we lost it in terms of trying to tame what has now become the color of very serious crime in the country?
I don't mean to put the police on the spot, but there are challenges inherent within the police system as it is today, that for community policing to be effective, those challenges would have to be addressed. One of them is even the capacity and capability of the police to respond to some of these social vices. I've been at Fora, and I'm sure Ms. Kemi will also confirm this, where gang members of certain call groups have been arrested by the police, and the question has been what to do with them. You've not tried them. They've not been subjected to our criminal justice system for them to be tried, and then the process of reorientating them to be serving members of the community, the police doesn't have that capacity. So there are a lot of issues that would need to be looked at as the police is set up today, if we're going to implement fully and see the objectives of community policing. So to answer your question directly, it's not only the responsibility of the police to manage quote-unquote community policing. Several stakeholders, including several security organizations, the government itself, members of the society, civil society organizations, our development partners will have to come in to see the success of this. When the proactive aspect of community policing, if it identifies challenges and then it looks for solution, I think million-dollar question would be how to find resources to address or to implement those solutions. One other critical element that has been mentioned in the course of our discussion is monitoring and evaluation. It's a missing element currently in the policing function as we have it today. So hopefully, as this discussion is progressed and the framework is being established, M&E2 will be a critical component of community policing that will be implemented.
All right. Kingsley, CPI Abubakar, we'll give him time after the tweet, to respond to some of this, because you see, this time around, community policing has just been, let's say, it's about being rejuvenated. And if it does not work this time around, then of course, we'll not be...
There'll be more concern.
Exactly.
All right. We indicated that, of course, you could participate in the conversation at the outset and through our Twitter handle at NTA GMN. You can see that at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. We have a number of tweets that have come in. We'll go through them. Law Alpha C tweets, Nigerians who have resolved to assist the security agencies in fighting insecurity should be and ought to be protected. Most people are scared of working with the police for fear of disclosure of their identity to criminal elements.
Okay, now, Sani Michael Omakoji, to achieve this, traditional rulers, religious leaders, civil society, government at all levels must be sincerely involved in the recruitment process. However, some of us are still against the introduction of community policing for fear of being hijacked by some governors.
Now, Amabola Babs has this tweet. He said, what needs to be done is a proper framework that ensures that political office holders do not abuse the system. We can't afford to continue losing our precious citizens for fear of abuse. take, for instance, the issue of banditry in Zamfara. The success recorded in recent times was because of the involvement of locals, vigilantes and volunteers from affected villages. Ditto for the northeast, where Boko Haram caused quite a lot of mayhem.
All right, Festus Akimbo, many types of informal policing structures have been established in many of our communities to deal with crime. The government should formalize them and give them the necessary training and equipment. It's now clear that current federal police cannot provide security and protection for all Nigerians. Community police or policing that will be truly rooted in our communities will help curb crime and the fear of crime.
Dele Jack Solomon, community-oriented policing is based on the premise that citizens should be empowered to enhance their quality of life and prevent or eliminate crime and the problems that lead to crime. Everyone benefits when community members understand the role and function of the police department and become active proponents of law enforcement.
Now, Omobola or Babs, it's an open and short fact that community policing is the best form of tackling internal security quagmire. Natives understand the terrain of the environment better than any outsider, regardless of whether trained, whether home or international. Such office possesses time to act.
This is coming from Chris Sibion. Whether it is community policing or state policing, if people of integrity and the right mindset do not man the system, insurgency will be escalating. And my question, therefore, is with the needed strategies on ground, are we ripe for community policing? Well, can we manage it effectively?
Okay. From O.T. Zobea, I hope he really understands what we're talking about. Community policing is a good idea, but will they be armed? You know, that means he may not really gotten a grasp of it. But he continued, the government needs to improve the life of our police officers to function well, and more officers are needed to improve visible policing. Here in South Africa, okay, so here is South Africa. We have more private security as compared to government agencies, and they are doing great. They are well trained and equipped, just like the police. They are visible at every corner. I think it means this person wrote from South Africa.
Yeah, apparently so.
Here in South Africa.
Yeah, that's right, apparently so. But next time, let's know where you're writing from in South Africa. Sandy Michael Amakoji again has this. So before we can think of formalizing community policing, we must first work on the mindset of some governors who already see this development as a window of opportunity to witch hunt their enemies. Community policing is not meant for vendetta or social engineering.
Now, Mobolaham again, over time, the fear against community policing or state policing, as may be seen in other quarters, is the case of abuse by political gladiators in states against their perceived opponents. But this excuse is not enough compared to the damage its non-adoption is causing the country.
Now, this is coming from a handle, DW, and it says, trust has to be built between the police and community. No one shares intelligence with the police because it's a risk. You could be arrested as an accomplice or your identity revealed to the perpetrators of a crime. That's where the problem is. I know Kirian indicated that we'll give CP Yahya Abubakar time to respond to some of the points that are on the table. But just before we do that, that will be part of your closing thoughts. But I would like to return to Jos, Professor Etanibi Alemika. Professor Etanibi Alemika, in giving us the historical perspective on the advent of community policing, you did refer to the U.S. And some persons, the U.S., and then, of course, what the structure could be like in our own environment. Some persons would argue that the police in the U.S. is decentralized. So beat patrols are much more effective, and for a police officer who is on the beat to take decisions, there are certain levels of competence and education would be required. Do we have those factors present with us on the one hand? And secondly, we have seen the phenomenon of, say, a commissioner of police, oftentimes in an antagonistic relationship with the governor, would say, listen, he takes instructions from Abuja. How would that impact on community policing? And how can we also deal with political interference? We have all kinds of offenses committed during the election cycles. A few thugs are arrested here and there, and after that, that is the end of the story.
Thank you. From the comment by the public, either from the email you have just read out, there is still a continuing confusion between the word community police and community policing. And when people are talking abuse of governance and all those things, they're talking about community police or state police, not about community policing, which is a framework. It's difficult for a governor or anyone to abuse community policing if it is properly established and properly managed. It is not within, in fact, what community policing tries to do is to take decision-making away from if you like, governmental agencies and locate them within the community where safety is required. So we must continue to educate our people that we are not talking about community police, we are talking about community policing. That is mechanisms that are located within communities to provide safety and security. Now, with respect to your question, in the U.S., like I said historically, in the early 60s, there was this allegation that American police were evading black communities, poor communities as army of occupation, and they were usually there to intimidate and oppress them on a continuous basis. So as part of the American police reform in the 60s, motorized policing became the order. They now call it professional policing. So rather than have them on the beat, police were merely patrolling in motorized vehicles, and they lost the knowledge of the community, the contact with the community. And that was the problem, the way police operated until the 80s again, when the idea, of course, that, look, we're losing in terms of our ability to police our communities because we're no longer there. We no longer have the kind of contact we have. We need to go back and be part of the community, be accepted by the community, not just to be in a patrol vehicle with a siren that drives through the community. That is where the change took place in the 1980s in the American system. In terms of structure of police, community policing can work once you understand the philosophy of let there be priority for security and safety concerns of the people at the local level, and therefore respond to it. And I think that is what is critical. We need to allow community to define their priorities in terms of safety and concern, and then they are empowered working with the security agencies, the law enforcement agencies to address them. Next to that, the question you've just asked again is whether those conditions are available. Community policing requires a lot of skills. It requires a lot of change of attitudes, not on the part of the police or policing agencies in Nigeria, but also on the part of the community. People have, talked about police. There is this tendency in Nigeria to try to use the police to abuse other citizens. That also can be a problem of community policing. Because no matter how you try, that's what we find wherever community policing have been implemented. You tend to find that some people are more active in participating at the local level than others. They can also abuse that familiarity with the police in intimidating other people. So community policing can also be a platform for victimizing the rights of minorities. For example, a community might say, oh, women who wear trousers are our problem. We want police to stop them. Oh, young people who wear certain kinds of hairstyle is our problem. And therefore, that's why we want police to collaborate with us to solve. So it is not all good about community policing. That's why you need a measure of law, a measure of policy, a measure of accountability, and evaluation to guide that operation. Community is not homogeneous. They have different powers, different interests, and therefore this also has to be managed. Finally, I think the point needs also to be made. When we talk about policing, policing does not drive society. It is your political and economic structures and institutions and the quality of political and economic governance that will determine the quality of your policing. So let us not expect too much from community policing about the police if we continue to have poor political and economic governance, because these are the things that create problems of insecurity in society. So as long as the creator of insecurities are not addressed, those who are asked to react to it will not be effective. So I just want us to take the discussion on a broader level rather than on the lower scale.
All right, that's another good analysis. CPI, I will just give you time, to touch on certain issues that have been raised. There's a disconnect between the offices of community policing and, of course, the community itself. And again, it is believed at different quarters, that the future of policing in Nigeria depends largely on how efficient community policing will be. Now, technology is changing the core aspects of how we interact in society. And when society changes, of course, you need to change the tools, the mechanisms, the techniques in which you fight crime. So what are the strategies for the current community policing that has emerged?
All right, thank you very much. I think all what I've been discussing here, community policing itself, its implementation, what are the challenges, what are the problems, the gaps, how do we go about it, has just been captured by the professor himself in analysis. And Kemi Ekyomodo, all what we've discussed here. Where are we today? Where are we going to be tomorrow in terms of community policing? Whether it's going to be successful or not. The whole thing boils down on what the professor said. Quality of leadership, the economic situation of the country, the whole mindset, the entire philosophy to be drawn, to be implemented. There must be complete holistic commitment by the superstructure itself, which is the government, that will drive the entire process. And let me also point out that community policy is giving back to the community the power to police itself. Whereas the police, as an institution, enforces the law itself. For instance, the police work together with the community, identify the problems that are within a particular community, then resolve those problems by picking out the bad guys from the good guys. But the driver of that policy should be the community itself.
And that's in the process.
In other words, consultation, cooperation, interdependency between the police itself and the community in which they operate.
Now, Prof raised the issue of using the police to launch vendetta, or abuse other people. That's another.
The possibility is very there. Is there.
So how do you obviate that?
Well, the thing is, we have checks and balances, and we have some structures and mechanisms that try to check those kind of abuses. Anybody who is found to be involved in this will be dealt with according to the provisions of the law.
All right. As Kabiru Adamu and indeed the other guests did say, there will be many more matters arising on how to get community policing much more effective in our country. So on that note, we would like to thank all of you for being part of this discussion this morning. Commissioner of Police, Yahaya Abubakar, who is the CP in charge of community policing at Force Headquarters. Thank you for being with us and good morning.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciation also to Mrs. Kemi Okeyodo, who is team lead Nigeria Policing Program. Thanks a lot for being on the program.
Thank you.
And deep thanks to Kabiru Adamu, a regular analyst on Good Morning Nigeria. He's a security risk management expert. Kabiru, thanks a lot for being around.
Thank you for having me.
From Jos, we were joined by another regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria, Professor Etanibi Alemika. He's a professor of criminology at the University of Jos. Prof, thanks a lot for your insights. All right, so let's go over now to the Weather Center to check out what the prospects would look like for the rest of today.
Hello and welcome to the weather forecast with Paul Uba. Abuja and most parts of the country experienced long hours of rainfall between Wednesday afternoon and Thursday morning. Do we expect to see a repeat of such an event again on Friday? Let's now find out from the forecast. In the morning, fair weather is expected across most parts of the country, extending from the north down to the south. However, there are very high chances of thunderstorms over the high grounds of the Mambila Plateau extending down to the southeastern coast. The afternoon looks more viable for more organized thunderstorms over the southern parts of the country and over the central part of Nigeria. The northeast and the northwest also look very viable for organized thunderstorms. Next now is our temperature forecast. Please stand by and thanks for watching.
Well, and that's a Good Morning Nigeria for today. We thank you for being part of it. It's another weekend, Kingsley, you know, and we're going to have some break for the weekend, and of course return on Monday for another edition of GMN. That's Good Morning Nigeria. My name is Kyrian Umari.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I thank you all for being with us on the program. As Kyrian said, we're back on Monday, same time, 7 o'clock. That's in the morning. But remember, you can watch a repeat of this program on NTA News 24. That's on DSTV, channel 419. Have a wonderful weekend.